This is undoubtedly about to be a really interesting offseason for Dynasty running backs because this rookie's running back class is the strongest that I have seen since probably 2017. When we had Alvin Kamara, we had Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, a bunch of guys in that particular class were awesome. I think this is about to be a running back reset that we're going to see. So we're going into the top 30 running back rankings. Just make sure to go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support because this still is a very new Dynasty channel. So getting into our first here, I've got two guys right here that I do think that we can have a discussion about who belongs at 1 and who belongs at 2, but I don't think that we can discuss these two guys not being the only ones allowed in this tier. I've got Jahmyr Gibbs at number 1 and Bijan Robinson at number 2. So with these two guys, they're obviously coming into the third year in the 2025 season. Now, the reason I prefer Jahmyr Gibbs over Bijan right now in Dynasty is because when I look at Jahmyr Gibbs, he's just a little bit younger. He's 22. Bijan's already 23. Jahmyr Gibbs also... he's just been in an offense that's been very, very successful over the years. Now, of course, that could be attributed to, the offensive coordinator over there, Ben Johnson, for all those years. But I think it runs deeper than that. I do think that they will take a hit offensively without Ben Johnson, but I also do think that just because that he's gone doesn't mean they don't have a great offensive line. Right? So this offense is built around the run game, and I think it's because Jahmyr Gibbs is excellent, and of course he has pass-catching duties as well. Bijan Robinson also just had his breakout year this year. I think he's going to be here to stay in this top 5 range for fantasy football. Moving forward, I don't think it's going to be questionable that he's going to be a good player. I just don't have as much faith in his offensive line and just, frankly, his coaching staff. I think Detroit still has a really strong coaching staff without Ben Johnson, and I do think that I trust them to utilize Jahmyr Gibbs better moving forward than I trust the Falcons utilizing Bijan a little bit better. Splitting hairs here, but they both belong in tier 1. Now, getting into our next tier, I've got Devon Achane at number 3, and I've got Breece Hall at number 4. So with Devon Achane, he's 23 years old as well. Honestly, I could even maybe understand an argument that Devon Achane should be in tier 1. The reason I didn't put him in tier 1 is because, again, I have concerns with the Dolphins coaching staff. Mike McDaniel is a very smart offensive coordinator, but I do also think that Mike McDaniel, it was proven that he is really reliant on Tua. When Tua went down, Devon Achane's production absolutely dropped as well. So yes, Devon Achane is absolutely going to be a great running back for them moving forward. They're getting rid of Raheem Mostert, but that didn't even matter in 2024 for them. And I do think that just in overall, Devon Achane, with his pass-catching upside and obviously how efficient he is on the ground, is definitely going to be a running back asset that you want on your dynasty team for the next several years. And with Breece Hall, it's obviously a team thing as well. Breece Hall, the one good thing that I really like about him is that he's still so young. The guy came in the league in 2022, and he's only 23 years old. Like, the guy is still plenty, has so much youth on his side. And I do think that just coming off a lower season doesn't really sway me as far as how I feel about Breece Hall moving forward, because this is a contract year for Breece Hall. So he's going to come in this year and show out. And this is a year that you absolutely want to have Breece Hall on your dynasty team. I think he's going to come in, have a really good year. And I think that whether he stays in New York or whether he goes somewhere else, he's going to have a bright future in dynasty moving forward as well. Saquon Barkley at number 5. And I've got also Ashton Jeanty in this tier at number 6. So Saquon Barkley, there's probably an argument that people would make to say I'd rather have Saquon than Breece. I don't think it's particularly that close to me, in my opinion. Saquon Barkley's 28 and Breece Hall's 23 years old. Like, that's a big deal when it comes to dynasty fantasy football. And Saquon Barkley, also, you have to think about it like this. I remember the year that Cooper Kupp had his Triple Crown season, right? Back in 2021, where the Rams won the Super Bowl because of Cooper Kupp's dominance that year. I sold him in Dynasty for a very, very heavy profit. Multiple first-rounders, got Tyreek Hill out of the deal as well. People looked at me at the time like I was crazy. Well, Cooper Kupp peaked that year. Saquon Barkley just had a unbelievably historic season. And I'm not saying that he won't be good next year, but the chances that he lives up to that again and has another dominant season like that, they're pretty small, man. Like, this may have been peak Saquon Barkley. And, this might be the time. Age would definitely indicate that he goes downhill. And add on top of the fact that he's gotten some injuries, I see issues here, and that's the reason I don't like him over Breece Hall. But obviously, Saquon Barkley is still dominant enough right now to be inside the top 5 of dynasty backs. And then Ashton Jeanty right here. Obviously, we have no idea where Ashton Jeanty is about to land. I have speculation that he could end up a first-round running back. I don't know. I don't know, to be honest with you. I don't know enough yet about where teams are leaning with their first-round picks. But I do know that he's a fantastic player. Like, it's unquestionable what this guy is able to do on a football field. He was a Boise State running back, but I don't even think it matters. I think everybody just sees through the fact that, yeah, he was at Boise State. The guy could have played for anybody in the SEC, in the Big Ten, and he could have still dominated. He's 21 years old heading into the NFL. We know that he'll be the first running back off the board. And I just think that his talent and his skill set is something that absolutely will translate to the NFL and to fantasy football success throughout the next several years of his NFL career. I think it's just a matter of who gets him is going to determine how low or how high he ends up in fantasy football rankings moving forward, particularly in Dynasty. Now, dropping down to our next tier, I've got Bucky Irving at number 7, and I've got Kyren Williams at 8. You know, I'll get to Kyren here in a minute. I do think that Bucky Irving is being underrated in Dynasty. Look, guys, Bucky Irving is 22, right? He's coming off a great rookie season. Not just a good one. Like, the guy had a great rookie season. He overtook their number 1 running back, Rachaad White, in his first year. Now, the one thing that I see as a downfall is him losing Liam Cohen, their offensive coordinator, but the Tampa Bay Buccaneers lost Dave Canales, back before last year, and they still ended up with a good one this year. I just think that Bucky Irving clearly showed that he's the better runner than Rachaad White. I think he has a great passing down opportunity potentially coming up in 2025 that will absolutely depend on what they want to do with Rachaad White. But either way, Bucky Irving has got the age on his side. He was so good that I don't think they're going to be looking to replace him, even though he was not a day 2 pick in the NFL draft. I think he was just too good, and they're going to stick with him for at least another year or two. And I think Bucky Irving is going to run away with this one. Now, Kyren Williams at number 8 at 24 years old. I even tinkered with, putting him down a little bit lower. And the reason I did that is because, Kyren Williams, when you look at the numbers on the screen, what he did on a per-game basis, he did pretty good. He had a pretty good season, and he ended up getting 14 touchdowns on the ground. I'm not saying that he was bad or anything like that. What I will say is that Kyren Williams did have a lot of fumbles this year, and they came at big times. They were not just one fumble in week 1, in the first quarter. There was not a fumble in week 8 in the fourth quarter when they were killing their opponent 21-0. It wasn't like that. He fumbled a lot in big games. And I get it. They're talking about extending him already this offseason. So that tells me that they want the guy long term. But it also I just don't know how I ultimately feel about Kyren Williams until he actually gets the contract. I still do think that he's going to be a very good dynasty back and a very good fantasy back as long as he has the opportunity. But I need to see that contract first before I put him inside contention to be a top 5 dynasty back. James Cook at 9 and Jonathan Taylor at 10 to round out this tier. James Cook, 25 years old, coming up on a contract year for the Bills. I think this is a good year to have James Cook, particularly in Dynasty, as he tries to earn a big contract. It is concerning that he is 25, will be 26 in the 2025 season, so he's already an older running back out of that draft class in 2022. I still do think James Cook is going to be dominant for the Bills next year. I think, of course, like I said, he's got the motivation for the new contract. I think he's still explosive enough. I don't see any reason to indicate that he will lose efficiency and lose explosiveness heading into 2025. I do think that all that is still going to be there. I'm a little worried about what his future is after the contract extension, but I do think right now he's still a top 10 guy, and I still think Jonathan Taylor is as well. I think this was a big redemption year for Jonathan Taylor, and I get it. Jonathan Taylor was not there all season, and he was not dominant all season. But of course, he was dominant when it counted in the fantasy playoffs. Probably won you a championship if you had Dynasty, or at least got you to the championship. I know he did in one of my Dynasty leagues. And I just think that, look, the guy's 26 years old on a long-term contract behind a good offensive line. So yes, they've got all this dysfunction elsewhere, and they do. They've got plenty of dysfunction at quarterback where it matters most. But Jonathan Taylor is the one steady thing on this offense that even when you've got Anthony Richardson there taking touchdowns from the goal line from Jonathan Taylor, the guy is still a dominant running back at his position, and I don't think that he's losing efficiency next year. Dropping out to our next tier, I've got Amarian Hampton, rookie running back, 21 years old, out of North Carolina. I think Amarian Hampton is a great running back prospect. You take Ashton Jeanty out of this one, I think he's clearly the number 2 running back in this class. Would be number 1 without Ashton Jeanty. Amarian Hampton's got the size, he's got the speed, he's got the production profile both in the receiving game and on the ground as well. Dominates in the goal line. The guy is going to be a day 2 pick in this year's NFL draft. And I just think that when you look at how many teams are going to be potentially moving off of their aging running back or just need a running back in general, I think Amarian Hampton is going to step in right away and be a dominator for a team. Yeah, I really like him inside the top 12 already, not even knowing where he goes. And then I've got Josh Jacobs at number 12. Josh Jacobs is interesting to me. You know, the guy's 27 years old, and I do think that that's concerning in and of itself because that's typically around the age where you want to move off of a running back. But Josh Jacobs, again, has great things to look at from last season and moving forward. Running back for the Green Bay Packers. Great offensive line. Great offensive mind at head coach with Matt LaFleur. Excellent scheme guy, and Josh Jacobs was dominant this year when they let him. He was dominant when they let him be the guy. And listen, you know, Marshawn Lloyd may or may not turn into the guy that they wanted him to be, which would be a complimentary piece of Josh Jacobs. I think the writing was on the wall at some point last year where he was so dominant the more touches they got him, that being under contract moving forward, I think Josh Jacobs has a lot of good years as far as, you know, his contract goes. I think he's got 2 to 3 more really good years for the Green Bay Packers here. I think that's why he's got to be inside the top 12. Dropping down to 13, I've got Kenneth Walker, and I've got Chuba Hubbard at 14 as well. With Kenneth Walker, 24 years old. Future is very uncertain in Seattle for sure. Like, the guy's coming up on a contract year right now. And it's been disappointing and spotty as far as what his production has been over the past 2 years particularly. Now, what I found really interesting was that if you don't know, Clint Kubiak is now in Seattle being their offensive coordinator. They got rid of Ryan Grubb, who I actually think did a pretty good job on a lot of metrics last year, but they wanted to move on and get Clint Kubiak. And Clint Kubiak was talking about Kenneth Walker a couple days ago, and he was saying, you know, this guy is going to have a big role in this offense. We're going to lean on him a lot. So I think that just his confidence in Kenneth Walker tells me that if KW can stay healthy this year, I think he's going to have a big year. And I think that he's still so young that after his rookie contract runs out, wherever he goes, if he stays in Seattle or if he goes elsewhere, he's going to have bright years ahead in Dynasty. Chuba Hubbard is 25 years old, will be 26 when the NFL season starts. Listen, this is my guy. I love Chuba Hubbard. I was big on him heading into 2024. Won me a lot of money in fantasy football this year. He won me a lot of money in fantasy because he was so good and such a late round pick. Well, that's kind of gone now. Everybody has Chuba Hubbard at least on their radar heading into 2025. And listen, I think he has another good year this year. He clearly was the running back that was dominant for Carolina. He was really efficient when he was running the ball, and they clearly want him to be their guy. They just signed him to a big extension, and Jonathan Brooks is nowhere to be found. The poor guy's career may be over before it really even started. Chuba Hubbard absolutely does have an opportunity, though, to solidify himself as a top running back in the NFL with another 2 good years. So I don't particularly love Chuba Hubbard long-term. I'd rather try to sell high off of this season with Chuba, but I still do think that if you want to sell Chuba, don't undersell him. You've got a top 15 running back in Dynasty on your hands. Chase Brown at 15 to round out this tier. 24 years old. I'm not as big on Chase Brown in Dynasty as some other people that I've found through the YouTube community in Dynasty and just talking with my league mates in my own personal Dynasty leagues. I'm just not as big on Chase Brown. Chase Brown will be 25 heading into this NFL season. He was a late round pick, and yes, he was very good this year. But when you kind of think about the Bengals season as a whole, right? Like, exclude his numbers. You can see him on the screen, but don't think about those for a second. When you think about Chase Brown and what he was able to do for the Bengals, everybody collectively agreed that there was something lacking there with the Bengals, and everybody agreed that outside of offensive line, they didn't have as strong of a run game. And that is a fact. Like, Chase Brown is a great pass-catching running back. He also is very efficient on the ground, but he's not a dominator like Joe Mixon was. They were very reliant on Joe Mixon, and they just didn't realize it until he was gone. So my hunch is potentially that the Bengals go inside the draft and find a guy who can usually handle more of a workload just based on size than Chase Brown does. That's why I'm a little bit hesitant to commit to Chase Brown, but I still do like him at 15. Dropping down to our next tier right here, I've got Caleb Johnson. Caleb Johnson out of Iowa, 21 years old. I do think that he's going to be a really good dynasty back right away as well. Caleb Johnson is my number 3 running back in this draft. And again, it's pretty much a clear runaway favorite for number 3. Not as good as Marion Hampton, clearly not as good as Ashton Jeanty, but I think he beats out my number 4 running back in this NFL draft class. And I do think that Caleb Johnson, again, has the size profile, has the speed profile as far as what I've seen on film with the guy, that I think that he's going to be a very good contributor for a team this year. I do think that he'll be drafted in the 2nd and 3rd round on day 2, and I do think that regardless of what team gets him, they'll try to use him as their dominant number 1 running back. So for me personally, I would just rather take the shot on a rookie I have a lot of confidence in than I would rather take the shot on Derrick Henry at Christian McCaffrey at 17 and 18. Look, these guys are great running backs, right? Nobody's going to debate what their resume says. Everybody understands their resumes are fantastic. But when I look at Derrick Henry, 31 years old, that's the clear red flag. But to me, I'd actually rather prefer him over Christian McCaffrey because of the fact that Christian McCaffrey just has a longer injury history. And number 2, Derrick Henry is built for this, man. I've said this over the years. Derrick Henry is unique because he's got such a great body type that's uniquely built to handle the pressure and all of the poundings that he has taken over the years as an NFL running back. He's still got it, man. Like 2024 was a proven year for Derrick Henry in a lot of ways, and he did just that. So for me personally, I'd rather take the shot on my own dynasty team on Derrick Henry than I would for Christian McCaffrey, who I do think will have a good year this year when he is healthy, but I don't think that it's enough for either of those guys to be put ahead of a rookie running back that I do think has a bright future. Devin Neal at number 19 and Joe Mixon 20. Again, it's the same argument here. Devin Neal is not as good of a prospect as Caleb Johnson, and a lot of people disagree with me on Devin Neal. I really like Devin Neal out of Kansas. I think he's got a great skill set to be a really electric back in this NFL class. Even if he's in like a 2-back system where he's the 1-2 punch, I think that Devin Neal is going to be a really good dynasty back. 21 years old, the guy's really young, and I just really like his skill set with the pass catching upside and just the efficiency on the ground. I would just rather take the shot on him than go with a guy who is clearly at the end of his career. Joe Mixon, if you put the whole season together and you forget about how it ended, it was obviously a great year. But listen, the guy, I know I've been branded as a little bit of a Joe Mixon hater. I don't hate Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon, though, like looking at his last month of the season, basically, super underwhelming. Like lost people playoff matchups. That's what the reality was with Joe Mixon. Rebounded in the playoffs for sure, but he definitely lost juice at the end of the season. And the guy's 28, will be 29 into the NFL 2025 season. So yeah, I'd rather take the shot on Devin Neal to be my long-term dynasty running back than trying to get one more good year squeezed out of Joe Mixon in 2025. Dropping out to our next tier, I've got guys who are definitely uncertain right here. And I think this is a great tier to go over. Trey Benson at 21, Tank Bixby at 22. Now, before I go into any of these guys, I just want to say that I think this tier is extremely fluid. I like the tier of guys here, but I also think that I am not set on any of these rankings right here. You can order them however you want to. This is my preference right now, and I'll lay it out for you. Trey Benson at 21. I like Trey Benson a lot. I really like the prospect out of the 2024 class. I liked him better than Jonathan Brooks at the time. The guy is, he ended the year getting injured and ended the year on IR. But the guy is also running behind James Conner, who definitely did take a hit to Trey Benson's dynasty value because they signed him to another 2 years. So they plan on having him as their number 1 running back. Plans are different, though. Everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face by the famous Mike Tyson. That's what he said all those years back, and I think that kind of just serves them right to see James Conner get injured at the end of the year. Not saying I'm rooting for it or anything like that, but when you're counting on a almost 30-year-old running back for another 2 seasons when you've got this guy right behind you, I think Trey Benson ends up popping out faster than people think just based on how they signed James Conner to a new deal. That's why he's at the top of this tier. But Tank Bixby is right on his heels. Because I think Tank Bigsby, I just went over this in my buy low video, actually comes out and is the starter for Jacksonville this year. 23 years old, will be 24 heading into this NFL season in 2025. Tank Bigsby was so much more electric and so much more efficient on the field for the Jags than he was in his rookie year in 2023. I think they move on from Travis Etienne. Personally, even if they don't though, Tank Bigsby has shown enough just based on what he did in his second year, for them to give him an increased workload in 2025. And potentially for him to be their back after the 2025 season and Travis Etienne is officially gone off his rookie deal. I think Tank Bigsby has a bright future ahead as well. Zach Charbonnet at 23 and Travion Henderson at 24. So listen, I prefer Zach Charbonnet, Tank Bigsby, and Trey Benson over the rookie because I personally think Travion Henderson's overrated. I think he is. I really do think that Travion Henderson would have came out in the NFL draft already if he was any good. I get it. He was injured and he had a lot of injuries in college, but Travion Henderson just never broke out as a true number one running back. And a lot of people want to throw him into running back one consideration. I don't think he's in the same class as guys like Amari and Hampton, as guys like Caleb Johnson. I just don't think that's the case here, man. So yeah, I'd rather take Zach Charbonnet, 24 years old. We know his role. We already know he's a really good running back in the NFL. Then I'd rather take Travion Henderson, who I still believe belongs in this tier because I think that he has a bright future with a role with a particular team. I think he's a really good pass-catching running back and could be used as a pseudo Alvin Kamara type to where he's not the dominant carry back for a team, but kind of becomes a Miami Dolphins 1-2 punch with Raheem Mostert and Devon Achane. A Detroit Lions running back 1-2 combo with Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he could kind of be that receiving back that just isn't as dominant as those guys because I just don't think I saw enough from him in college to say that. He stayed until he was a senior for a reason, guys. So that's why I personally prefer all those running backs in this tier over Travion Henderson. But like I said, I'm not going to argue with you if you want to rearrange this tier right here. Dropping down to our next tier, I've got them clearly above this tier right here because I see a lot of uncertainty in this tier. Isaiah Pacheco at 25. This is going to be an interesting one to hear. I don't know how people feel about Isaiah Pacheco. This is my gut call. I may be misreading the situation, but the guy is 25 years old, right? He was already an undrafted player. Now, he did really good work for them. Helped them win a Super Bowl in 2022 and 2023. But Isaiah Pacheco comes into this season. Everybody's got really high hopes for him. Gets injured. Not just any injury. Breaks his femur, basically, right? He comes back and is not the same guy. Not even close. They can't even rely on him to get like 15 touches in a game. That was bad. That showed me that, yes, maybe he was coming back too early, but it also showed me that maybe he's just not the same guy because he's not as young as people think. 25 years old, will be 26 heading into the NFL season. Coming into a contract year, I think there's a decent chance Kansas City moves on, gets a different running back. Like I said, I could be misreading the situation. You tell me what you think of Isaiah Pacheco's ranking because I've got a lot of problems with Isaiah Pacheco in Dynasty right now. I would much rather have rookie running backs than him. Cam Scatterbo at number 26. Rookie running back. A lot of people disagree with me on my ranking of Cam Scatterbo. I don't care. Until the draft comes, Cam Scatterbo will be in this range right here. Because I think that there's a lot of teams that will look at this guy and what he showed in his college career. Tough guy, really just like a workhorse for Iowa State. I think that he's going to absolutely be a favorite of an NFL coach that wants to run the ball. Sean Payton comes to mind. Denver needs a running back desperately. The Los Angeles Chargers come to mind with Jim Harbaugh. Those two coaches in particular, they're going to draft a running back. And Cam Scatterbo, I can easily see him fitting into there. I get it. I'm really kind of threading the needle here with Cam Scatterbo by projecting him to be a Charger or a Bronco this year. But I just think that an NFL team is going to give him an opportunity to be their guy because he has the intangibles that you want and he also has the production profile that you want as well. Cam Scatterbo at 26. Dave Montgomery at 27 and Tyjae Spears at 28 to round this tier out. Dave Montgomery, 27 years old. Tyjae Spears, 23. Take your pick, essentially, what you want to do. Because the reason I prefer Monty over Tajay is because of the fact that Dave Montgomery, we actually know can be a top 12, top 15 running back in fantasy. We actually know that can happen, right? So even though he's like on the final year of his deal with Detroit, coming off a lot of injuries, this guy has had a plagued injury career in the NFL. 27 years old, maybe we're going to see the drop-off when Dave Montgomery comes back in 2025. But I'd rather take the shot on that than Tyjae Spears, who's 23, but also has lots of knee issues himself. Doesn't have an ACL. This guy is never been able to put together anything good for a long period of time in fantasy football. So even though he had a great end to the year, helped me get to a championship in some underdog drafts and win a lot of money, I just don't really see Tyjae Spears as a great dynasty back, even if they were to move on from Tony Pollard here in 2025. Now, dropping down to our last tier, we're going to end it off with these two, Dylan Sampson and Alvin Kamara. Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee, really young guy, 20 years old. The guy has a great prospect profile, in my opinion. Has the size, has the speed, absolutely has the production as well. Not as, impressive of a prospect athletically and production-wise as a lot of those other guys that I've been through that are rookies. But I do think he will be a day two guy. So again, it just comes down to philosophy in Dynasty. I would rather take the shot on him than I would rather take the shot on one more good year from Kamara. Even though I like Kamara, and I like Kamara over guys like Tyrone Tracy Jr., Travis Etienne. I personally do. Because Alvin Kamara, even last year, was still awesome in fantasy football. Now, it was very much a Joe Mixon type of arc that he had in 2024 where he was really dominant at the beginning and then he absolutely tailored off. But the Saints had so many issues, and they still have so many issues, that I don't know how they're going to iron them all out. So he'll be 30 heading into the season. Alvin Kamara, I just don't want to put as much stock into him at Dynasty as I would a rookie running back that I have a lot of faith in. So let me know what you think of these rankings in the comments below. And if you want to see the best buy lows in Dynasty right now, click on this video right here.